Hey everyone, so today I'm on the York River. As you can see, we're at VIMS, and what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be taking a look at our habitat cages. And as you can see behind me, that little pole, we have about 20 habitat cages out there. And what we do is we fill them halfway with oyster shells, and then we put them out there for 6 months to a year, and we check on them every once in a while. And the baby oysters will attach to the shells and start to grow and form little oyster habitats. So once we go inside, we're gonna explore our oyster habitat we have here and see what all kinds of different animals and plants live on it. So I'll see you there. So our first organism that we're gonna look at today are mud crabs. And mud crabs are different than blue crabs, like we've talked about in the past. They mostly live on rocky bottom or oyster reefs. So as you can see, the mud crabs have back legs and they don't have flippers like a blue crab does. So blue crabs can free swim in the water, and these guys are stuck to the ground. So if they wanted to get somewhere, they have to walk there. So that usually they live on an oyster reef their entire life. And you can see this one is a male, oops, and this one right here is a female. And this right here is her eggs. So there's thousands and thousands of little eggs on her bottom. And she's probably about to rub them off pretty soon. So what we have here, we have 2 sea squirts, and these ones are kind of small, so they can get up to like this big. And they have 2 siphons, which is hard to see right now. They might have them sucked in. And they suck in water in one and spit it out in the other one. So they're similar to oysters. That's how they feed. They'll suck in water and spit it out to get like little algae and little organisms. And they're actually probably the closest invertebrate today that we're going to look at that's related to us. And so when they're juvenile, free-floating as plankton, they have a notochord, which is a primitive backbone. And as they get bigger, they'll lose that and they become an invertebrate. So right here, we have a red-bearded sponge. And it's pretty cool. You'll see on oyster reefs around here and more in the Mobjack Bay, there's a lot of red-bearded sponge. They'll absolutely cover the oyster shell or whatever they live on, and they're also an invertebrate as well. So right here we have a hooked mussel, and this is one of our bivalves that we're going to be looking at today. And a bivalve meaning 2 shells. They have a shell on each side, and the mussels are symmetrical, unlike oysters, which are not. Mussels and clams are both symmetrical, and they'll have both shells the same. And this is a hooked mussel, and that's the most common we find around here. And they'll live on our oyster reefs, and right here is their, where the shell opens. Well, sorry, it opens over here. This is where their hinge is. And right here they have their bristle threads, which they attach to oyster shells or whatever they want to, and that's how they hold on. So if we took this guy and set him in this tank right here, he would probably attach in like a couple hours, which is pretty cool. So right here, we have our eastern oyster, and there's actually 1, 2, 3, there was 4, there's 3 live ones now. So what you can probably say is there was a shell, and then the baby spat. When they spawn, the males release the sperm and the females release the egg, and they'll connect in the water, and they'll create a baby oyster, and they'll float around in the water, and they'll look for something hard, and they stick to. So like if a baby oyster was floating around and found this, he would stick to it because it's clean, there's not much mud on it, it's easy for them to attach to, and then they'll start to grow. So once they attach to it, they'll grow, and these oysters are probably 1.5 years to 2 years old, roughly. And you can see that they've attached to multiple shells. So this probably was 1 shell in between these 2 oysters, and they've attached and grown about 3.5, 4 inches long now. So that's pretty cool. And you can see this right here is their beak. This is where they would open their mouths to get suction in their food. And you can see it's really brittle. So that's all their new growth from this year. You can see the white right here. So that's about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch long of new growth. And oysters, as I said about the mussels, they're also bivalves. They have 2 shells, but they're not symmetrical. As you can see, the bottom shell is normally bigger than the top shell. They're in cups like this. And yeah, and an oyster can filter about 50 gallons of water a day, which is a ton. And so when you have lots of oyster reefs, you have cleaner water. So right here we have a barnacle, and this is another invertebrate. And as you can see, it's right here, the little round thing. And when they're in the water, they'll actually come out, and they have a little feather that comes out the top, and that's how they collect their food. So they'll collect little algae and little invertebrates out of the water and eat them. So right here we have two amphipods, and as you can see to the left is their face. The two little black dots are their eyes. So one's a male and one's a female, and they're actually breeding right now. So they will stay with each other for a while, and they'll become impregnated, and then she'll release, and then she'll form the eggs, and then have them in the wild. So what will happen is these two amphipods can be either green or they can be brown, and it depends on the time of the year and what they're eating. So if some are eating algae, they'd be green, and if some are eating detritus, which is dead stuff, they'd be brown. So these ones are most likely eating some type of detritus, and that's why they're more of a brownish, clear color rather than green. So right here we have some fish eggs, and these fish eggs are actually naked goby eggs. And we'll talk about the fish in a few minutes. These were actually in a dead oyster, and it was like semi-open. So we opened it, and there was a naked goby sitting inside with her eggs. So they'll stay and guard them until they hatch and protect them from any predators. And you can see each little round, like tan blob is one egg. So as they mature and become ready to hatch, they will eventually turn almost black from their eye spot. So right here we have a common clamworm, and they're the most common worm that we find in the oyster reef. And you can see they have tons of little appendages that come off their sides, and a lot of people mistake them for bloodworms because it looks like they have blood flowing through their body, and they do, but the bloodworms are a lot more pronounced and dark red. And you can see that's his mouth in the front with the little antenna coming off, and they can actually shoot out their mouth to engulf whatever they want to eat. And they have like a pair of pinchers that come out when they do that. Right here we have two skilletfish, and we also have a picture that we'll put up here of their bottom. And they're called skilletfish because they kind of look like a skillet. And then on the bottom they have a suction cup. So you usually see these guys in aquariums sticking to the side. And this is their tail over here, and then their mouth is right here. And you can see his gills moving right there. Right here are naked gobies. And as you can see, they're a lot slimmer than the skilletfish, and they have their mouths in the front right here. And the reason they're called naked gobies is because they're actually naked. They don't have any scales on their body, so they're similar to the American eel. They just have slime protecting their body. You can see they have their eyes on top of their head. They're similar. They look kind of like an oyster toadfish. We didn't see one today, but sometimes we'll get them in the oyster reefs. And they have their eyes on top of their head, their mouths in front of their body.